Back in the 1970s and 1980s, Hollywood found itself split down the middle between two larger-than-life titans battling for the throne. On one side stood Sylvester Stallone, the gritty underdog who bled his way to glory in Rocky. On the other was Arnold Schwarzenegger, the muscle-bound powerhouse who turned bodybuilding into box office gold, with roles like Conan the Barbarian and the Terminator. For years, their rivalry wasn't just on the big screen, it was personal, cutthroat, and fueled by ego. Now, at 79, Stallone is finally breaking his silence on Schwarzenegger, pulling back the curtain and confirming the truth about their fiery history. From struggling actor to Rocky Balboa, Stallone's fight for glory. Before Sylvester Stallone ever became Hollywood's ultimate underdog, he was just a scrappy kid born in Hell's Kitchen, New York, on July 6, 1946. His roots were as colorful as his future. The son of Jacqueline "Jackie" Stallone, a celebrity astrologer and women's wrestling promoter with French and Ukrainian Jewish blood in her veins, and Francesco "Frank" Stallone Sr., an Italian immigrant who built a chain of Maryland hair salons and lived for the thrill of polo. His younger brother, Frank Stallone, would grow into his own fame as an actor and musician. But from the start, Sylvester's life was destined to be the wildest ride of them all. Even his name carried drama. Jackie once admitted she first wanted to call him Tyrone, after her screen idol Tyrone Power, but Frank Sr. wasn't having it. He stamped the boy with Sylvester instead. To classmates, though, he was Binky, a nickname that soured into Stinky when the schoolyard bullies came calling. Trying to dodge the cruelty, young Sylvester went by Mike for a time. His middle name, Gaudenzio, is a twist on the Italian Gaudenzio dot he would later trim down to the slicker Enzio. Every part of him, from the name down, seemed to be caught between mockery and reinvention. But it wasn't just the taunts that shaped him, it was fate. And fate came cruel at birth. A complicated delivery forced doctors to use forceps, severing a nerve that left the lower left side of his face paralyzed. That drooping lip, that snarling expression, that slurred voice, the very features that made him iconic on screen were the scars of his first day on Earth. In childhood, they made him a target. Kids mocked him. Teachers doubted him. One guidance counselor even told Jackie bluntly that her son was fit only to run a sorting machine or maybe work an elevator as an assistant electrician. But Stallone was already wired differently. He wasn't planning on pushing buttons for someone else's life. He wanted to write his own script, literally. He set his sights on acting and screenwriting, no matter how impossible it looked. The early years weren't easy. Stallone spent part of his infancy in foster care before returning to his family. At 5, the clan moved back to Maryland. Later, in the early 1950s, Frank Sr. shifted them to Washington, D.C. to open a beauty school, while Jackie doubled down on her unconventional streak and launched a women's gym called Barbella's in 1954. By the time Sylvester hit his teens, his parents' marriage was falling apart. At 11, after the divorce, he lived with his father, but by 15 he was back with his remarried mother in Philadelphia. And Philadelphia, as it turned out, was where the young Stallone really began to sharpen his edge. High school kids were merciless. In one particularly cruel jab, he was voted most likely to end up in the electric chair. Yet even with the ridicule, Stallone found his way into schools that kept him moving forward. Notre Dame Academy, Abraham Lincoln High School, and Charlotte Hall Military Academy in Maryland. The structure helped, but the dream was always bigger than the classroom. By 1965, Stallone had crossed the Atlantic and spent 2 years at the American College of Switzerland. That European chapter widened his world, but Hollywood was still the North Star. Returning to the U.S., he dove into drama studies at the University of Miami from 1967 to 1969. He didn't finish the degree then, but decades later, the university made things right. In 1998, they handed him a Bachelor of Fine Arts, crediting his life and career as the ultimate proof of mastery. From binky to stinky, from foster care to being written off as a lost cause, Stallone carried scars, doubts, and rejection. But instead of breaking him, they hardened him into the man who would one day bleed his way through Rocky, proving every guidance counselor and high school bully dead wrong. The knockout that changed everything, Rocky's rise to immortality. Before Rocky turned him into a legend, Sylvester Stallone's climb to stardom was a grind, raw, humiliating, and built on pure desperation. In the late 60s, he was hustling under the name Mike Stallone, before switching it up to Sylvester E. Stallone in 1970, searching for an identity that might finally stick. While still at the University of Miami, he managed to land a small role in the student drama That Nice Boy in 1968. Around that same time, he teamed up with his buddy John Hertzfeld to cobble together a no-budget film called Horses. But Hollywood wasn't exactly rolling out the red carpet. His first starring role wasn't in a blockbuster. It was in a soft-core flick called The Party at Kitty and Studs. Stallone pocketed just $200 for 2 days' work, a paycheck born from pure survival. Evicted from his apartment and broke enough to spend nights sleeping inside the Port Authority bus terminal, he admitted later that it was either take the role or start robbing people. Years later, after Rocky made him a household name, the film was shamelessly re-released under a new title, Italian Stallion. The nickname, once a cheap marketing trick, would become part of his Hollywood mythology. Off-Broadway wasn't much kinder. Stallone performed in an erotic stage play called Score in 1971, which barely made it through 23 performances. By then, he was living in New York with his girlfriend Sasha Chak, an aspiring actress who picked up waitress shifts to keep them afloat. Stallone, meanwhile, bounced between odd jobs, cleaning up at the zoo, working as a movie usher until he got caught scalping tickets, and even killing time in libraries studying Edgar Allan Poe, sharpening his writing chops. By 1972, the dream was slipping. He tried and failed to land even an extra role in The Godfather. Instead, he wound up nearly invisible in the background of Barbra Streisand's What's Up, Doc? It was rock bottom. Yet, just when he thought about walking away, a lucky break came. An agent spotted him during a stage play and believed Stallone was perfect for the role of Stanley in The Lords of Flatbush. Production was messy, plagued with delays and money problems. But Stallone finally had a real part. Around the same time, he landed his first full-on starring role in the 1973 indie No Place to Hide, playing a young man tied to an underground terrorist group. The film went nowhere, eventually being chopped, recut, and even turned into a parody years later under the title A Man Called Rainbow. Between those struggles, Stallone picked up scraps wherever he could. A blink and you'll miss it soldier in MASH, a party guest in Pigeons, a thug in Woody Allen's Bananas, an extra in Clute. Even a youth who gets tackled by Jack Lemmon in The Prisoner of Second Avenue. The roles were forgettable, but Stallone never quit swinging. By 1974, he landed back in the spotlight with The Lords of Flatbush. The following year brought supporting roles in Farewell, My Lovely, Capone, and the cult favorite Death Race 2000. Then came 1975, the year that would change everything. On March 24th, Stallone watched Muhammad Ali square off against Chuck Wepner. The fight lit a fire inside him. That same night, he rushed home and began writing. 3 days later, the first draft of Rocky was born. Studios wanted the script, but not him. Offers rolled in. $350,000 for the rights, but only if someone like Robert Redford or Burt Reynolds played the lead. Stallone stood firm. No script without him in the ring. After endless negotiations and a budget slash, he finally got his way. When Rocky hit theaters in 1976, it didn't just launch Stallone. it became a cultural phenomenon. Critics called him the next Brando. The film was nominated for 10 Oscars, with Stallone himself up for Best Actor and Best Original Screenplay. It went on to win Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Editing at the Academy Awards. Overnight, the scrappy kid once voted most likely to end up in the electric chair had written himself into cinematic immortality. Rocky Balboa became more than a character. The Philadelphia Museum of Art's front steps became forever known as the Rocky Steps. A statue of the Italian stallion himself was erected nearby. Decades later, the International Boxing Hall of Fame even enshrined the character. What began as the story of a nobody punching above his weight had turned Sylvester Stallone into one of Hollywood's most unstoppable forces. Stallone's love life. Sylvester Stallone's love life has been just as explosive as his movies. Messy breakups, shocking betrayals, and public scandals that could rival any Hollywood script. For all his larger-than-life heroics on screen, behind the scenes, his relationships often crashed and burned in spectacular fashion. It all began in 1988, when Stallone met Jennifer Flavin, a 19-year-old model who suddenly found herself swept into the orbit of a 40-something superstar. On the surface, they looked picture-perfect, but cracks soon showed. By 1994, Flavin revealed that Stallone had ended their relationship in the coldest way possible, with a 6-page handwritten letter sent by FedEx. The pages rambled, but the truth he left out was the most painful part. He had cheated with supermodel Janice Dickinson. Flavin only discovered the affair when her own modeling agent broke the news. Years later, Stallone admitted on national television that his behavior was an abomination and confessed that he couldn't live without her, describing Flavin as his sun, moon, and everything in between. Against all odds, the two reunited, married in 1997, and went on to raise 3 daughters together. But even that seemingly unshakable marriage nearly imploded. In August 2022, Flavin filed for divorce, accusing Stallone of recklessly wasting marital assets and demanding the court bar him from using their shared money until the case was settled. Insiders claimed their union had been crumbling for years, and they stayed together only for their children. A month later, though, the couple reconciled. Flavin was tired of being ignored, but Stallone promised to change. Reflecting on their near split, he admitted to the Sunday Times that it forced him to realize nothing mattered more than family. A hard lesson he had to learn late in life. Long before Flavin, Stallone's first marriage had already set the tone for his chaotic romantic history. He wed Sasha Chak in 1974, and together they had 2 sons, Sage and Sergio. When their younger son was diagnosed with autism, doctors urged the couple to institutionalize him. Refusing, they took on the challenge themselves. Sasha devoted her entire life to caring for him, while Stallone buried himself in work. By 1985, their marriage had fallen apart, fueled by rumors that Stallone had been unfaithful with Danish model Brigitte Nielsen. Those rumors quickly became reality. Just months after his divorce, Stallone married Nielsen in December 1985. The whirlwind romance looked beautiful on the outside, but behind closed doors, Nielsen admitted she had doubts from day one. Their marriage collapsed in less than 2 years, with rumors of her alleged affair with director Tony Scott adding fuel to the fire. Hollywood insiders branded Nielsen a schemer who had used Stallone as a stepping stone, leaving him humiliated. Nielsen herself later claimed she was blacklisted in Hollywood after the divorce, forcing her to return to Europe. Stallone's affair with Janice Dickinson would be just as dramatic. In 1994, Dickinson gave birth to a daughter she believed was Stallone's. Convinced he was the father, Stallone committed to her, even proposing. But a DNA test later revealed the child wasn't his, and Stallone ended the relationship with a cold one-liner. "Send my regards to Mr. Birnbaum." Dickinson recalled him walking out without looking back, ending their affair on the spot. For Flavin, who had been planning a future with Stallone at the time, the betrayal cut deep. Even after Dickinson, Stallone's romances didn't settle. He briefly dated 22-year-old Andrea Wieser before moving on to supermodel Angie Everhart. Smitten by her magazine cover, Stallone helped her break into acting, and within weeks, they were engaged. But the relationship flamed out almost as quickly as it began. Reports painted Stallone as controlling, dictating her meals, her clothes, and even her plastic surgery. In a shocking claim years later, Everhart revealed that during her breast augmentation surgery, Stallone convinced the doctor to go against her wishes while she was sedated, leaving her with health issues that haunted her for years. Through it all, the failed marriages, scandals, betrayals, and brief flings, Stallone eventually circled back to Jennifer Flavin, the woman who had endured his worst mistakes, yet remained the center of his universe. For a man who built his career on the story of an underdog fighting for redemption, it seems fitting that his greatest personal battle was keeping the love of his life by his side. But while Stallone was wrestling with the chaos of Hollywood love and the constant need to rebuild himself, another titan was quietly preparing his own ascent. From muscle to movies, Arnold's unstoppable ascent. Arnold Alois Schwarzenegger wasn't just born. He was forged in the tiny Austrian village of Thal, under the shadow of a father who carried both a Nazi past and a policeman's iron fist. His father, Gustav, was a decorated military policeman who had survived Stalingrad and malaria and came home with scars that didn't just mark his body, but shaped his brutal parenting. His mother, Aurelia, was softer, grounding Arnold in the Catholic faith. But inside that house, the hierarchy was crystal clear. Gustav adored Arnold's older brother, Meinhard, and looked at Arnold with suspicion, even saying that maybe the boy wasn't his son at all. Arnold grew up in a world of cold discipline and poverty. He remembered the thrill of his family buying their first refrigerator as if it were treasure, and the sting of belts and fists when Gustav wanted obedience. In interviews, he later called it ch***s, but at the time, it was simply life in post-war Austria. The difference was Arnold's reaction. While other kids broke under the rod, he stiffened his spine. Every slap, every "you can't" became fuel for rebellion. He swore he would escape, that he would be rich, famous, and untouchable. At school, he was no prodigy. Dyslexia made reading a struggle. Teachers and classmates remembered him as exuberant, cocky even, a kid who could fill a room with laughter. Still, what really shaped him wasn't the classroom. It was the gym. At 14, his football coach marched him into a weight room, and something inside Arnold snapped into focus. Barbells replaced soccer balls, iron replaced leather, and he quickly decided this wasn't a hobby, this was destiny. By his mid-teens, he was sneaking into gyms when they were closed, breaking locks just to train. Missing a workout made him physically sick, he said. Movies became his second church. He sat in Gruss theaters watching muscle gods like Steve Reeves and Reg Park, memorizing their physiques, their heroics, and their very aura. When Reeves died decades later, Arnold admitted he wouldn't have become who he was without him. Discipline turned to obsession, and obsession into ambition. By 18, Arnold was already serving his mandatory year in the Austrian army. But even that couldn't chain him. He went AWOL just to compete in the Junior Mr. Europe contest, won, and promptly landed himself in military prison for a week. He didn't care. That taste of victory outweighed punishment. Then came the turning point. In 1966, at the NABA Meister Universe in London, Arnold placed second. For most, second place is a disappointment. For Arnold, it was gasoline. A judge named Charles Wag Bennett saw his potential and offered him not just training, but also a bed in his cramped London flat. Arnold accepted, trading comfort for greatness. The Bennetts gave him something he hadn't truly felt before: guidance, love, and belief. Under their wing, his English got better, his discipline deepened, and his dream became clear. He wouldn't just lift weights, he would conquer the world. The next year, at 20, he returned to London and claimed the Mr. Universe crown. He was the youngest to ever do it. More titles followed, and each one built his myth. Munich became his training ground, London his proving ground, but America was the battlefield he craved. At 21, with barely any English and nothing but muscle and audacity, Arnold boarded a plane to the United States. He landed in Los Angeles in October 1968, walked into Gold's Gym in Venice, and planted himself at the altar of Joe Weider, the bodybuilding kingmaker. Within 2 years, he was Mr. Olympia. By 23, he was the best-built man alive. By 30, he was a 7-time Mr. Olympia, rewriting the sport. What made it juicier was the hunger underneath it all. He wasn't just lifting weights. He was lifting himself out of Austria, out of poverty, and out of his father's shadow. He studied business and marketing in between reps, earned a degree by correspondence, and became a U.S. citizen in 1983, transforming from the boy Gustav Beat into the man the world would eventually call the Terminator. The Terminator that cemented a legend. If Sylvester Stallone was the scrappy underdog of action cinema, Arnold Schwarzenegger was the immovable force, a muscle-bound gladiator who stormed Hollywood with a grin as big as his biceps. His breakthrough came in 1982 with Conan the Barbarian, a sword and sorcery epic that made him more than just a bodybuilder with an accent. It turned him into a box office star. The film's success birthed a sequel, Conan the Destroyer, in 1984. It didn't roar as loud as the original, but by then Arnold was already pivoting to something bigger. Destiny was about to strap a shotgun to his back and etch his name into film history. That moment arrived in 1984 when James Cameron cast him as the relentless, emotionless killing machine in The Terminator. With those glowing red eyes and a voice that made even a simple "I'll be back" sound like a death sentence, Schwarzenegger found his signature role. It wasn't just a hit, it was a cultural explosion that cemented him as Hollywood's new king of steel and shadows. But Arnold wasn't content with being a one-note action figure. He pushed into other lanes, testing his range. He swung a sword again in Red Sonja, then flexed his way through a string of high-octane hits like Commando, Raw Deal, The Running Man, Predator, and Red Heat, each one a masterclass in mayhem. Audiences couldn't get enough. Guns got bigger, body counts climbed higher, and behind the scenes, his rivalry with Stallone became its own blood sport. The two icons tried to outdo one another with more explosions, more muscles, and more outrageous weapons. Still, Schwarzenegger had something Stallone didn't lean on as much: humor. Where Stallone's heroes brooded, Arnold could wink, crack a line, and somehow make mass destruction feel fun. That gift paid off in 1988 when he teamed with Danny DeVito for the comedy Twins. Studio execs hated the idea, convinced no one wanted to see the Terminator making jokes. Arnold took the gamble anyway, even refusing a salary up front, just to prove it could work. It worked. Twins not only smashed the box office, raking in over $100 million, but it also earned Schwarzenegger his fattest paycheck ever, more than $40 million in profit shares. Suddenly, the Muscleman was Hollywood's funniest tough guy. The hits kept rolling. Total Recall, a mind-bending sci-fi thriller inspired by Philip K. Dick, brought him another massive payday, $10 million plus a slice of the gross, making him one of the highest-paid stars alive. That same year, he proved he could swap bullets for babysitting in Kindergarten Cop, teaming once again with director Ivan Reitman. But his undisputed peak came in 1991 with Terminator 2, Judgment Day. Bigger, louder, and more spectacular than the original, the film crushed the box office as the highest-grossing movie of the year. Critics who once dismissed him began to respect his craft. Roger Ebert summed it up perfectly, noting that Arnold's genius was in finding roles that didn't fight his natural strengths, but amplified them. By 1993, Hollywood crowned him International Star of the Decade. Yet even legends stumble. That same year, his self-aware action spoof Last Action Hero opened against Jurassic Park and got bulldozed. But Arnold bounced back with True Lies in 1994, reuniting with Cameron for a stylish, witty spy romp that brought audiences back in droves. He followed it with Junior later that year, another comedy with DeVito that earned him a Golden Globe nomination. Proof that the Austrian oak could flex comedic timing as easily as he flexed muscle. But not every decision was golden. He famously turned down The Rock, a role that could have reinvented him, and instead gambled on Eraser and Jingle All the Way in 1996. Then came Batman and Robin in 1997, where he donned icy blue armor as Mr. Freeze, spitting out frosty one-liners that made audiences groan. The film bombed so hard it nearly froze his career. Add a back injury to the mix, and Schwarzenegger's once invincible box office streak began to falter. The late 90s and early 2000s brought darker, less successful fare, like End of Days, The Sixth Day, and Collateral Damage. None struck the same chord as his earlier work, but in 2003, he roared back one more time as the Terminator in Rise of the Machines. The film grossed over $150 million domestically, proving that no matter how shaky his career looked, audiences still craved the machine that started it all. By then, Schwarzenegger's impact was undeniable. In his hometown of Graz, Austria, admirers even proposed building an 80-foot statue of him as the Terminator. Arnold, in classic fashion, brushed off the idea. He said the money would be better spent on causes like the Special Olympics, showing that behind the iron frame was still the immigrant kid who wanted to make a difference. Schwarzenegger had gone from sword-wielding barbarian to unstoppable cyborg, from action's deadliest star to a box office comedian, carving out a career so massive it reshaped Hollywood itself. The Ladies' Man. Arnold Schwarzenegger didn't just live a life, he lived 5 of them all at once. World champion bodybuilder, Hollywood's ultimate action hero, governor of California, and behind the curtain, a man whose personal life was just as explosive and messy as any blockbuster he ever headlined. For half a century, Arnold has been adored, idolized, and scrutinized. And if his career played out like a movie, then his love life was the off-screen drama that rivaled the best of them. By his early 20s, Arnold had already conquered Austria, becoming the youngest to ever win Mr. Universe. But America was calling, and in 1968, he packed up his ambitions and muscle-bound frame for Hollywood. Almost immediately, he found love in Barbara Outland, a sweet college student who wanted marriage, kids, and a quiet life. For 6 years, they shared a Santa Monica beachside existence. Barbecues, sunsets, Arnold training like a machine. But Barbara quickly realized she was dating a man whose dreams were far bigger than domestic bliss. As Arnold himself admitted, she wanted an ordinary life, and I hated the very idea of ordinary life. The split was inevitable. Arnold's next chapter? Chaos, dressed as romance. In 1977, he entered an open relationship with hairdresser Sue Murray. Their arrangement was a cocktail of freedom and desire. When Arnold was in town, she was his, but when he wasn't, both could see other people. For 4 years, the thrill worked, until Maria Shriver walked into the picture. Maria wasn't just any woman. She was a Kennedy, niece of Ethel, cousin to Camelot's golden legacy, a woman with pedigree and power to match Arnold's growing fame. The two met at a tennis tournament that year, and sparks flew, though Arnold kept juggling Maria and Sue. By 1978, Sue had had enough, leaving him with Shriver, who became the new center of his universe, or at least, the public believed so. Because even as Arnold's fame got bigger in the 1980s with Conan, the Terminator, and Predator, rumors swirled like wildfire. And they weren't just rumors. On the set of Red Sonja, he fell into a very public affair with model Brigitte Nielsen, parading through Europe like a couple in love, while Shriver waited back home. Nielsen even wanted to marry him, but Arnold brushed it aside, keeping his ties to Maria as shaky as they were. Despite knowing of his history, Maria said yes to Arnold's third proposal in 1985, after rejecting him twice before. They wed in a lavish ceremony in Hyannis, Massachusetts, uniting Hollywood muscle with America's political royalty. The picture-perfect family soon followed. Catherine in 1989, Christina in 1991, Patrick in 1993, and Christopher in 1997. From the outside, they were America's power couple. Arnold making millions on the big screen, Maria thriving as a journalist, and their children stepping into the spotlight of privilege. But inside the marriage, Arnold's pattern never changed. Talks of flings and one-night affairs became front-page stories. Biographers wrote about alleged dalliances with co-stars and Hollywood hopefuls. Some women came forward, others stayed shadows. But the truth was clear. Arnold's loyalty was always divided between his ambition, his desires, and his family. The breaking point came not from rumors, but from a secret that could no longer be hidden. In the mid-1990s, Arnold had an affair with the family's housekeeper, Mildred Baena. In 1997, she gave birth to a son, Joseph. Just days after Maria delivered Christopher. For years, the boy grew up under Maria's roof, his resemblance to Arnold becoming more undeniable with every passing year. In 2011, the truth finally shattered everything. Arnold admitted he was Joseph's father. Maria, who had stood by him through scandals, accusations, and even the storm of 15 women accusing him of misconduct during his 2003 gubernatorial campaign, had reached her limit. After 25 years of marriage, she filed for divorce. The Kennedy-Shriver-Grace gave way to a tabloid implosion. Their split was ugly, but not final in spirit. Though divorced in 2021, nearly a decade after the affair came to light, Maria and Arnold remained tied together by their children and, surprisingly, by mutual respect. Arnold continued to praise her as a mother, while she kept her public grace intact, protecting their family legacy, even as their marriage collapsed. And Arnold, he didn't stay single for long. By 2013, he was in a new relationship with Heather Milligan, a physical therapist nearly 3 decades younger, a fresh start, a quieter love, and a partner who shared his passion for fitness. The two are still together and, by all accounts, happy. Yet, through all the chaos, scandal, and betrayal, one truth remains. Arnold Schwarzenegger's personal life was as epic, turbulent, and larger than life as the movies that made him a legend. He wasn't just the Terminator or Conan or even the Governor. He was a man who lived without moderation, in triumph and in ruin, and who left scars on those who loved him most. And here's the part worth noting. Arnold wasn't alone in this. Just like him, Sylvester Stallone had a reputation for being unfaithful. Behind the macho personas and blockbuster franchises, both men struggled to keep their private lives clean. Affairs, broken marriages, messy headlines, these were as much a part of their story as the guns, muscles, and explosions that made them icons. In a strange way, their personal scandals mirrored the chaos of their professional rivalry. Neither man knew how to do anything halfway. Not in love, not in career, not in life. Which brings us to the other battlefield they fought on, the one that defined Hollywood's action era. Hollywood's Cold War, Stallone versus Schwarzenegger. Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone may be best buddies now, but back in the glory days of their action hero reign, the two could barely stand each other. The rivalry between Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger wasn't some friendly Hollywood banter. It was a 20-year war of egos, headlines, and sabotage that played out both on-screen and off. Two titans, one from Hell's Kitchen and the other from the Austrian Alps, locked horns in a battle that became legendary. Their first encounter set the tone. It was 1977, the 34th Golden Globe Awards. Stallone, still riding high from Rocky's 6 nominations, sat at the same table as a rising star named Arnold Schwarzenegger. Stallone was nominated all night, but he watched his movie lose category after category, while Arnold, the Austrian bodybuilder turned actor, casually walked away with the new Star of the Year award for Stay Hungry. Stallone later revealed that Arnold laughed at his misfortune. The humiliation burned. When Rocky finally took home Best Motion Picture, Stallone couldn't resist. He picked up a bowl of flowers and hurled it across the table at Schwarzenegger. From then on, it was war. The two blasted each other in the press, each trying to prove he was the real king of action cinema. The competition escalated into absurd one-upmanship. Bigger guns, higher body counts, flashier explosions. In 1985, Arnold landed a brutal shot. In an interview with the News of the World, he mocked Stallone by claiming he used body doubles and scoffed at the idea of being mentioned in the same breath as him. That same year, Stallone answered back on screen with Rocky IV. His opponent, the icy Soviet Ivan Drago, was widely seen as a thinly veiled parody of Schwarzenegger, a blonde, muscle-bound foreigner with a thick accent. The rivalry was no longer subtle. By 1988, things had turned nastier. Journalist Wendy Lee published a shocking News of the World headline, "Hollywood Star's Nazi Secret." The piece claimed Arnold had fervent Nazi and anti-Semitic views, pointing to his father Gustav's Nazi ties. The source? Allegedly, Stallone. Lee later said Stallone not only fueled the story, but even helped cover her legal fees when Schwarzenegger sued. Though Gustav had indeed joined the Austrian National Socialist Party in 1938, there was never evidence he participated in war crimes. Still, the mud stuck, and Arnold spent years denouncing the rumor. The paper eventually apologized and paid damages, but the smear left a bitter scar. That same year, the New York Post ran yet another bizarre twist. Stallone had reportedly stormed into a nightclub, spotted a picture of Schwarzenegger on the wall, and demanded it be taken down. The owner handed it over, and Stallone's entourage ripped it to shreds. The blows kept coming. When Stallone got his hands on Wendy Lee's unauthorized biography of Schwarzenegger in 1990, filled with revelations about steroids and family demons, he reveled in it. According to Lee, Stallone bragged that reading it was better than getting 4B jobs. Arnold eventually admitted he had used steroids in his bodybuilding days and confirmed his father had been an abusive alcoholic. But that didn't lessen the sting of Stallone's glee. Their feud even spilled into their movies like coded messages to the audience. In Twins, Schwarzenegger mocked a Rambo poster, smirking that his muscles were bigger. Stallone clapped back in Tango and Cash, where he beat up a thug who looked suspiciously like Arnold. Years later, Stallone admitted he imagined Arnold's face while filming the scene. Schwarzenegger answered in Last Action Hero, where a Terminator 2 poster showed Stallone's face instead of his. Then, in Demolition Man, Stallone discovered that by 2032, Schwarzenegger had his own presidential library. Each movie was like a battlefield, with the audience in on the joke. But one of the dirtiest tricks came off camera. In the early 90s, a script floated around Hollywood for a little movie called Stop, or My Mom Will Shoot. Schwarzenegger smelled a bomb. He pretended to be interested in starring, knowing full well Stallone's competitive streak wouldn't let him pass it up. Sure enough, Stallone pounced, desperate to outdo his rival. The result was a disaster, widely mocked as one of Stallone's worst films. Years later, Arnold openly laughed about it on Jimmy Kimmel, admitting the setup was intentional. Stallone himself recalled the betrayal on Jimmy Fallon, still shaking his head at how badly he'd been played. What started with flowers at the Golden Globes had exploded into 2 decades of sabotage, parody, and personal attacks. Stallone and Schwarzenegger weren't just rivals. They were locked in a Cold War of Hollywood machismo, each trying to outgun, outmuscle, and outlast the other. What do you think about the 20-years-long feud between the two stars? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.